I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we dive into a powerful story, a poignant story. It is called Smallwood Drift. It's written by a wonderful author. His name is Andrew Wentz. This heartfelt narrative, this heartfelt memoir, takes us back to his childhood in the 1940s in Western Pennsylvania, amid the challenges of an impoverished coal mine and steel mill environment. Join us right now as we explore this moving testament to resilience, hope, and the enduring power of memory. We're delighted to have this very powerful author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his remarkable books. The links are below this interview. Andrew, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Great to see you, Logan. How are you?
I'm doing great. This story really brought me back to a different time. I didn't grow up in the 40s. I grew up in the 60s, but a lot had not changed in those 20 years. It was a simpler time. It was a better time. We were poor. I was poor. You were poor, but we didn't know it. And that was kind of the wonder of our childhood, don't you think?
I do. I do. Like indeed, we were so poor. We had meat once a week. It was usually a chicken that my dad killed, and we didn't have running water in our house. We didn't have inside plumbing. We had a outhouse.
Mhm.
There was no television. There was no internet. There was no cell phones. Actually, not many people had telephones back then,
Yeah.
and so it was a whole different world. And the kids today, or the young people today, they have no idea what the world was like then. I mean, uh, and that's what I try to bring out in my book, because I have six kids, and they don't have any idea what kind of life I had, because um, I was fortunate enough to give them a better life than I had. They didn't have to work their way through college like I did. They didn't have to. I mean, they always lived in nice houses, nice cars, plenty to eat. We went on nice vacations,
Yeah.
so they had a lot of things that I never had, that I wanted to give them because I could, and I never had the opportunity. So, um, but
With something, with
like my
something's
dad,
gained, something's lost, of course, as well. I mean, you learned a lot of great values by being poor and not realizing it. You learn to use your imagination. You learn to go out and just play. I mean, you didn't have toys growing up, but you didn't stop you from having a great time, right?
that's true. That's true. No, we didn't have toys. We made toys from a tin can and a flat rock, or we'd make rubber band guns from an old inner tube, and just games like hide and seek and cops and robbers, where we would just hide. We didn't have toys. We didn't have the money for that.
Hmm.
Uh, um, but but because our neighbors were in the same boat that we were, we didn't realize how poor we were. We didn't have television, so we didn't see how the other half lived. And we just went on day by day, and we did what we had to do. And like you said, uh, it really helped with my imagination, because there were no kids in my neighborhood that I could play with. So I spent a lot of time alone. But I found myself going into the woods, and I built a pond, and then I caught small fish and I put it into the pond. Um, I found the I found the valley. I called it my secret valley. It was kind of hidden, and I came upon it, and there was a little waterfall there, and a little brook, and moss. I took my shoes off and I walked through the moss. It was just so wonderful. And I used to go there pretty frequently. I take a book, and I'd sit by the waterfall and read my book. Um, but it was like such a different world, such a different world. But um, I was going to mention too about my dad. He worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week, down in the coal mine. He worked at Vesta 4, which was the largest bituminous coal mine in the world at that time. And like I said, he worked 12-hour days, so I didn't get to see him very often. and then sometime he would be coming home early, and I'd run down the road to see him. I was so glad to see him, and he'd have this long face, and I'd say, "What's wrong, Dad?" And he would tell me, "Well, Jim got covered up today, or there was an explosion and 6 men died." And a lot of accidents would happen. That would happen maybe once every month or two. There'd be a death, and the mining company, where they would turn the miners loose when there was a death, because they didn't want them to riot, get upset and start rioting. So they would send everybody home. And
amazing how hard your father had to work. It's amazing the conditions he had to work in. This story must have been quite a trip down memory lane for you, if you will. You actually have put together a sequel to it as well, in a way, a book that has even more stories and some photographs.
Yes, it's called Vesta 4 Road, and it's named after the mine, after the coal mine. Like the road that we lived on was called Vesta 4 Road, and so that's where it got its name. Smallwood Drift, that one, the name comes from the little area where we lived. There's a wide spot in the road called Smallwood. There were only maybe 25 houses there. But then at the end of that area, there were 6 houses. And on the mining map, they called where the 6 houses were. They called that Smallwood Drift. And that's where the name comes from there.
Amazing. Was there a part of the book that was difficult for you to write about, that was painful to look at, or troubling?
Yeah, there were several parts, because it's a story about a lot of things. There's some funny parts in it. There's some really sad parts in it. And when I started thinking about some of the sad parts, sometimes it almost brought tears to my eyes, because you forget about a lot of those things. But when I started putting the book together and writing all these other things, more and more things come back to me, And so, yeah.
Life was simple back then. Life was hard back then. Medical care, a lot of things weren't as advanced as they are today. Some things were better. You probably had a doctor who might have come to the house. We had that growing up, which was nice, when somebody was sick. But it was a tough time. I'm sure winters were long and cold, particularly leaving your house to go to the outhouse there in the middle of winter in Western Pennsylvania, right?
Yes. And back then, like we used a lantern because it gave off a little bit of heat,
Right. Amazing. Now, you've written some children's books as well, right?
Yes, I wrote 2 children's books. I used to tell stories to my kids when they were little, to put them to sleep, and I made up this community of personified animals, frogs and lizards and alligators and turtles and stuff like that. So the first one I wrote was about it's called Ernie's Flat Tire.
Awesome.
And it's about these 2 frogs that were good friends. They wanted to make a root beer float, but we're out of root beer, so they were heading for the store. They got a flat tire.
You're making me hungry for a root beer float now. That sounds great.
But I'll let people buy the book and find out what he did about that.
Yep.
It's pretty creative.
And apparently Ernie meets a psychic down the road as well in another adventure. Tell us about that.
Ernie meets a psychic. Yes, they were driving along. I think they were going to get a root beer float again, and they saw this sign. There was a tent. There's a psychic there, and so they wanted to get their fortune told. So they went to see the psychic. They sat down, and they got their fortune told all right, but they didn't like what they heard. So
Beware of
It's,
fortune tellers. You
it's
might not like what you hear. That's for sure. That's a good fair warning. The name of the book we've been focusing on today is called Smallwood Drift. It's written by Andrew Wentz. It's a powerful book. It's a heartfelt memoir that takes us back to his childhood in Western Pennsylvania. Sure, he was poor, but he didn't know it. There were a lot of wonderful times that are transpired and described in these pages, hard times as well. You will enjoy his journey. You will feel your own memory and sense of nostalgia as well. Before we leave you today, Andrew, have you thought of this as a movie? In the 1940s is such a great era to depict a film. You've got so much going on within the pages of your book. Christmas Story takes place in the 40s, and people love that. Have you thought about this as a movie?
Oh, I did indeed. Yeah, I think it would make a great movie. It's nostalgic. It it tells the story of a time gone by that most people never see. So it's I think people would really enjoy it and see a different life than you see today. There's like when I look around. Um, Things are just so different today. All the technology that has advanced in these past 50, 60 years, it's just amazing. You know,
Exactly. Smallwood Drift is life unplugged. And that's both for good and bad. And I think it's mostly for good in many ways. Andrew, thanks for joining us here today on Spotlight.
thank you, Logan. Nice to see you. And thanks for letting me talk.
I appreciate your time, sir. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.